Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the City of Los Angeles's 2023 to 2028 Assessment of Fair Housing Session on Homelessness and Social Service Needs. We are happy to have this discussion today, and we look forward to hearing from all of you who are key stakeholders, service providers in your field. I am Nancy from Aquaboa, and I'm with the Los Angeles Housing Department. And I'm joined by other LHD staff who will go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Joe Montano with the Housing Department. Happy to be here and hear the valuable input that you all will be sharing. I'll pass it over to our other staff member.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike O'Brien. I'm also with the Housing Department. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. We also have staff representing the Housing Authority of the City of LA, also known as HACLA. So I will allow them to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Serena Cannon, the ombudsperson for the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles.
Oh, was I on mute? I'm sorry, Ann Lynch from the Housing Authority. And Patty, you're there? And Hans?
Yes. Hi, this is Patricia Mendoza with the Housing Authority Section 8 program. I believe that Han is here as well.
Hello, hi, this is Han from HACLA. I'm the analyst with HACLA.
Great, thank you. In addition, we also have staff from our sister city department, Community Investment for Families Department, also known as CIFD, joining us. CIFD is administering the city's 5-year consolidated plan, and they're working to align their process with the assessment of fair housing work. I will allow CIFD staff to introduce themselves and to briefly speak about the consolidated plan now. I don't know if Angela or Rebecca are on. Okay, so moving on, I will now turn it over to Mosaic Community Planning, who is partnering with LHD and HACLA in developing the city's 5-year assessment of fair housing plan. They will be facilitating our discussion today, and they will start with a presentation.
Thanks, Nancy, and thanks everyone for joining. I'm Melissa Mayu with Mosaic Community Planning, and we'll be doing a brief fair housing overview and then getting into our discussion. We have a few other Mosaic staff on the call as well, if you can introduce yourselves now.
Hi, Jessica Fish, also with Mosaic.
Hi, this is Jessica Gay, and I'm an associate planner with Mosaic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heaven Sylvan. I'm also an associate planner with Mosaic.
So you'll see them, we'll do some breakout rooms later, and you may see them providing some information in the chat as well. So we have a pretty big group, so maybe rather than doing introductions now, if you all could, as we start discussion, maybe take some time, we'll do introductions then in smaller groups so that we can hear who is in our meeting with us today. But before we get to that, I'll do a quick overview of what we're working on. So we are doing what's called an assessment of fair housing, or AFH, which is a study that essentially will analyze the fair housing landscape in the city of Los Angeles, looking at whether all residents are able to access housing that is suitable for them, free from unlawful discrimination. The study will also look at how well people are able to access different types of community resources and opportunities depending on where they live. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, requires all cities and counties that receive HUD grants for community development or affordable housing to prepare these types of studies every 5 years. Additionally, as of 2018, the state of California also requires public agencies, including cities, counties, and housing authorities, to prepare fair housing assessments. So jump ahead there. Generally, when we talk about fair housing, we are talking about everyone's right to participate in the housing market. So to own, sell, purchase, or rent housing of their choice without fear of unlawful discrimination. So that includes things like renting or buying a home, but it includes other aspects of the housing process too. So things like obtaining insurance, having access to a home loan, having fair property appraisals, or just being able to live, in peace in your home without fear of harassment or discrimination. Under the Federal Fair Housing Act, everyone is protected from housing discrimination based on race or ethnicity, color, religion, national origin, sex, family status, and disability status. Additionally, the state of California has a series of laws that expanded fair housing protections to include several more protected classes, which you see listed there. So they include marital status, age, ancestry, immigration status, language, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, genetic information, source of income, veteran or military status, occupation, and other arbitrary factors. So you can see there that you have considerable additional fair housing protection at the state level, along with federally protected classes. And the city of Los Angeles also has some protected classes that are specifically protected by city law.
And if I can mention just under what we know as far as with from our Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department, we've learned that they are also protecting the language, citizenship status, as well as employment status. And that is specifically for the city of LA.
Thanks, Nancy. In 2015, HUD adopted a new fair housing rule called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing, or AFFH, which called on cities to take a more critical look at the role of housing in their communities. The AFFH rule requires cities to look at access to community resources and opportunities. So things like good schools, good jobs, transit, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and a clean environment. Cities need to consider whether everyone has equal access to neighborhoods with these types of opportunities, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or other protected class. The AFFH rule also requires cities to take meaningful actions to overcome patterns of segregation and to create communities that are inclusive for everyone. Cities must work to reduce affordable housing needs and other barriers that limit access to opportunities or resources. So this rule was passed in 2015. Under the Trump administration, HUD pared back its AFFH rule, essentially suspending the requirement to conduct a fair housing study. Then early in the Biden administration, the rule was reinstated, requiring up-to-date fair housing studies. And last month, HUD released a new proposed rule that would further define what those studies should contain. So that rule is still in draft form, but we're paying attention to it as we're doing this study as well. But as you can see, there's been some pretty significant evolution in terms of fair housing at the federal level over the last 8 years or so, and we're continuing to monitor those laws as they evolve. In terms of what the study that we're looking at will contain, you can see here a list of components for the AFH. We'll be looking at demographics and patterns related to residential segregation, integration, and income. We'll identify areas of the city with high levels of racial segregation, including those with high levels of poverty and high levels of affluence. So kind of looking at how income relates to race and where people live. We'll also look at access to opportunities, like some of the things I mentioned, schools, jobs, transit, clean environment, and whether everyone throughout the city has fair access to those types of resources. We'll consider housing costs and whether affordable housing need varies by protected class. We'll also look at public housing, tax credit developments, and other types of affordable housing. So what is available and in what parts of the city? What do those patterns look like? And then finally, probably the most important part of the study, we'll have a summary of key fair housing issues, and then a set of goals and strategies to address them over the next 5 years. Community input, including the input that we're getting from you today, will really help inform all aspects of this study. And in addition to meeting state and federal requirements, the AFH will be really important as local leaders make decisions about housing policies and resources. It's one way residents can voice their opinions to city and HACLA leadership about what they believe priorities should be for the next 5 years. The study will advance past fair housing efforts, so things like the city's housing element and its previous assessment of fair housing that was done in 2018. Ultimately, as I mentioned, what will come out of it is an action-oriented plan that will impact the city's decisions about how to spend grant funds it receives for housing, community development, and homelessness. But strategies will also shape other projects, programs, and policies by the city and HACLA. The final plan will be adopted by City Council and HACLA leadership and represents a commitment by both of those agencies to implement activities that expand fair housing and stop future housing discrimination for all residents. And just to give you an idea of some of the things that have come out of past fair housing studies. So for example, the city's law around source of income protection, protecting folks who have who use HUD or Section 8 vouchers to obtain housing. That was something that came out of the last assessment of fair housing. The city's tenant anti-harassment ordinance was something that came out of past fair housing studies the city has done, as well as eviction prevention efforts like Stay Housed LA and others. So this will seek to build on past work that the city has done. We'll get into our discussion in just a minute, but I wanted to share an outline of the timeline for our work. So you can see here several opportunities for community engagement. Right now we're in that first green bubble there, where we're doing a series of these stakeholder meetings. We're also doing several focus groups that are targeted to folks who are more likely to face housing discrimination or have fair housing needs. At the end of last year, we did a series of community meetings, which some of you may have joined. And we also have a survey open, which we'll talk more about at the end of this meeting. But then you'll see another input opportunity in July. So we will have some preliminary findings, goals, strategies that we'll want to present to you to get your inputs on and any feedback so that we can refine them to make them as strong as possible. And then later in August to September, we'll have a public comment period where the entire draft assessment of fair housing is available for the public to review. And then lastly, we'll make any final revisions to prepare for a fall approval by City Council and HACLA. Let's see. I will jump ahead here, and at this point, we'll take any questions anyone may have on the study that we're doing or our process for it. but then we'll get into more of a discussion. So yeah, if you have any questions, if you want to raise your hands, if you're joining by phone, you can use *6 to mute and unmute and *9 to raise your hand. And I think I saw a question in the chat about recordings of these sessions. So we'll have a link a little later to the project website, or someone may be able to put it in the chat for me now. And the recordings from the sessions will be on the project website. So you'll be able to access them there. Let's see, Terry?
Sorry, just a quick question. I was listening into this one here. And the initial topic of the discussion, wasn't it about homeless housing services and social services? It feels like we're repeating the same discussion over and over again. Can you be more specific on why not touch on that specific topic for today?
Sure. So our presentation is similar for each meeting because they're all for the assessment of fair housing. But then in the discussion areas, we have different questions for the different meetings and different folks attending different meetings. So it's more that the discussion will be different than the presentation, but it's all geared around fair housing.
Got it. And I'll chime in as we go along.
Thank you. Sure. Serena?
Yes, I'm calling from my phone. I had some technical difficulties, so bear with me here. I did have a question regarding the assessment that was done before and how of the different categories that we're going to be discussing today and some in the, for the next days to come, the outcomes on those discussions in terms of in the community meetings to the community that comes out. What has been the outcome of the previous studies in terms of the changes, and how has it impacted the different communities for the better or maybe not at all?
What have been the outcomes of the previous assessment of fair housing? Am I understanding you? Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, so and we'll share with you the link to our assessment of fair housing webpage. And on that page, we have listed our previous assessment of fair housing, 2018 to 2023 study. The full study is there, which includes our goals and strategies that came out of that work. There were 6 overarching goals, and I believe about 50 actual strategies that came out of that work. There were a number of metrics that were assigned to them over a 5-year period. And so all of that is in the plan. So the assessment of fair housing, it does not include any financial commitments, because that's not the purpose of the plan. Is for goal setting, is for development of different ideas in terms of amendments to programs, new initiatives, things of that nature. Some of the goals and strategies that come out of the assessment of fair housing, many of them are also become part of the consolidated plan, which Angela will eventually be able to briefly speak about. But once it's part of the consolidated plan, then it's something, those goals and strategies actually have financial commitments attached to them, where we can actually be able to speak to what particular federal funding could help fund those particular ideas, right? So that is how how they can move forward in that sense. There is, going forward in terms of changes to the assessment of fair housing plan, which Melissa spoke about, through HUD's current proposed assessment of fair housing rule. Going forward, there will be quite a bit of changes in terms of how we're reporting our progress and which will be on a yearly basis, an evaluation process and what have you that HUD will be requiring. And then just to give you a few examples of what was in our assessment of fair housing plan, which is now in place, there's quite a bit. So just give you a few examples. One of them was in regards to tenant protections and eviction defense. And what came out of that was the city's eviction defense program, which is currently underway. It was launched during COVID. That was one of the program goals that we had in the assessment of fair housing plan. The other thing was for the city to pass a policy that prohibits source of income discrimination. So currently we do have that in place where it is against the law for landlords or owners to discriminate against those who are Section 8 voucher holders or hold some other type of rental subsidy. And in fact, that's also a state law that's in place. And there's a number of other things that were in our plan that are currently in place right now, such as like the tenant anti-harassment ordinance that we have, and a number of other things in regards to tenant protections. So those are just some examples. But again, to see our complete plan, we will share with you the link to our webpage where you can find the plan on the bottom portion of our webpage.
And as we're doing this plan, there will be some metrics within it. So the city will set some goals for its fair housing strategies. And that's something that, as it is now, the city would have to report on each year through what's known as a consolidated annual performance evaluation review or report, or a CAPER. There's a section in there that asks about fair housing activities. But like Nancy said, HUD is working on that now, and I think going to be coming out with some new approaches for how cities report on their fair housing activities and whether they hit the metrics they've set. And I think Angela may have joined. If you'd like to talk about the consolidated plan a bit before we get into our discussion, please feel free, please do, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're a little soft, but we can hear you.
Okay, I apologize. I'm having technology challenges over here. Anyway, thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm Angela Peavy. I'm with the Community Investment for Families Department with the Consolidated Planning Team, and we are working on a 5-year plan that coincides with, or will eventually coincide with, the assessment of fair housing that LAHD and the consolidated plan represents about $600 million in federal grants that address housing and community development over the next 5 years. So most of that, I would say about half of that, has been going for affordable housing, and then another portion to address other things like homeless services. So a close tie and link here. So and then I think our consultants from National Development Council are also on this call.
Thank you. Let's see. Terry, did you have another question, or that your hand might have been up from earlier?
I've got to raise my lower hand, so I'll raise it down. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So we will, for the most of this meeting, is really, we want to have a discussion with you all about fair housing needs that you see in your work. To do that, we will be breaking into breakout groups, and we will have one that's really focused on homelessness, so housing and services for folks who are homeless. And we'll have a second group that's focused on other types of social services and domestic violence services. So you'll see those pop up in a minute. Before we break up though, I would like to let you know that we certainly want to hear from you all today. So definitely feel free to speak and share all your thoughts. But if there are things that you think of that you don't have time to share in the meeting or you think of afterwards, we have a SurveyMonkey response form that has all of our discussion questions in it. So if you want to provide your inputs in writing, that's available to do. And we're putting that in the chat right now. And we had a question about if the breakout rooms will be recorded, and yes, they will be. So definitely check out that SurveyMonkey link so you can get the form. And now I will stop the screen share and put up our breakout rooms. So you should see them now. You'll have to scroll down past that list of all of our names and get to where you can see homeless housing and services or domestic violence and social services. So just click on the one of those that you would like to join. Thanks everyone for joining us. Now that we're in a smaller group, if we could maybe do a round of introductions, I think that would be great, just to know who is here with us today. Arturo, would you like to introduce yourself again? I know you did at the start of our meeting.
Hello, this is Arturo Ibarra, and I'm quite interested in learning more about the homeless services and potential resources that might be available for nonprofits dealing with this matter.
Great, thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Terry J. I am the program coordinator for the Range program for the organization of the Trans Latina Coalition.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Smith. I am the case manager for a Step to Freedom organization.
Hi, my name is Erica Hoitzma, and I work for Sycamores, and I work with housing and the transitional age youth out here in the San Gabriel Valley.
Hey everyone, Dexter O'Connell with Safe Place for Youth on the West Side.
Hi everyone, Teresa Jones, Senior Director of Housing Administration with the People Concerned.
Hello, my name is Tasha Johnson. I have a nonprofit, Beauty Behind the Bricks in Watts.
Hi, I'm Trisha Shanklin. I'm with Step of Freedom. I'm the intern case manager.
Hello, I'm Serena Cannon. I'm buzz person with the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles. And as you know, we deal with a lot of homeless folks and people who are homeless needing resources. And so that's pretty much it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Evelyn from the People Concerned, Director of CES and Community Engagement.
Hello, my name is Armand Shabanza. I'm with the Genesis Center, Housing Case Manager.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dawn Thompson, Associate Director of Permanent Supportive Housing for New Directions for Veterans.
Thanks, Dawn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Flores. I'm working with the city on their consolidated plan, and I'm listening in today.
Good afternoon. My name is D. Danelle Gibson. I'm a field organizer with Abundant Housing LA.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kristen Astor, Director of Public Policy with the People Concerned.
And
good afternoon. My name is Jose Gutierrez. I'm also an ombudsperson with the City of Los Angeles Housing Authority.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. And also a note in the chat, Ivory Chambeshi with Watts Rising Collaborative and Mayor Bass's office. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. So we have a few questions that I think you probably saw on the agenda. And the first one, so this kind of came out of our community meetings, that participants really identified rent increases and potential evictions as major barriers to housing stability. Is that something that aligns with your experience? And how well do you feel like new City of LA renter protections, so things like the just cause eviction ordinance, just cause eviction protection ordinance, will help address some of that housing instability?
Hello, I forgot to say the name of the organization I work for. That's the What Century Latino organization. And we are, very much interested in the new programs that might be implemented by the city, HACLA, or federal entities, state entities, to somehow alleviate the homeless problem in our region. And also, how these programs are going to work to be effective.
Yeah, when you think of, so like the new just cause eviction protection ordinance, what kinds of things will really be important for that to be effective?
Okay, one of the obstacles for this program to be really effective is the language. Most of the people doesn't understand technical terms and doesn't know how to interpret the communication that comes from the bureaucratic system, and therefore they are pretty shy in responding to questions and to declare their real needs, and much more to find a way to be helped.
Okay, so making sure that things are in a clear language would be helpful, not technical wording. Dexter, I think your hand was up next.
Yeah, thank you. I think that the city putting some degree of actual effort into affirmative enforcement is extremely important. Expecting these to be self-enforced is not going to have success, and the city needs to be committed to actually affirmatively furthering fair housing by bringing the hammer down on people who are violating these. This is especially important to Safe Place for Youth because our population is primarily young people who have limited experience, not just with landlords, but also with the court system, and potentially trauma from previous court system experience as well. So ensuring that the city is by their side and not ambivalent to their struggle is critical.
Thank you. When we talk about kind of affirmative enforcement and being proactive about enforcing it, do you think that is that in terms of how the city acts when someone makes a complaint, or are there other actions that the city should be doing kind of independent of receiving complaints, kind of monitoring?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the city should be sending inspectors into the field to, work with folks directly. Frankly, the city should be using the rental registry that it already has for commercial properties on the business license or the business tax registration certificate to establish a rental registry for residential landlords who also have to submit the same business tax registration certificate and could be able to fill out the same thing that we ask of commercial landlords every time, so that the city has a fundamental record of these locations, all of these tenants, and then the city could use that database to effectively go out, send inspectors out, make sure that these things are not being violated. It is not terribly difficult, I'm sure, to follow up on complaints once they come through. But the city needs to be going out into the field and making sure that people are protected, that people know their rights, that people have a fundamental understanding of what the city's done. Because as Arturo already said, folks have difficulty dealing with bureaucracy. And if you're in a person who's in such a precarious situation that you need to depend on these kind of tenant protections, and particularly in our circumstances, if you're a young person, who doesn't have the kind of life experience that allows you to negotiate some of these circumstances, you need to know that the city is out there already helping you and that you don't have to go looking for them when you need this. So I do think that there are a lot of concrete steps that the city can take in terms of being out in the field doing education, but also doing inspections. And then in terms of collecting data on the location of residential tenancies through the BTRC system.
Great. Yeah, thank you for expanding on that. I think that's really helpful to hear that.
Of course.
Yeah, thanks. Serena, I think your hand was up next.
Yes, kind of piggyback on what Dexter was saying, with him. And the other thing is that for the tenants to know their rights, I think a lot of times tenants are not aware of their rights, and when they are subject to in the inspections from the city, having some literature there, or even when the owner registers the property, that the tenants also receives a notice regarding their rights. So in the future, if they have an issue with the landlord, then they have some resources and know which way, to get it handled and things like that. So it would be nice if a renter could receive that information beforehand, before all things fall apart.
Yeah, we've heard that a few times in these meetings. So I think that's a great point, and maybe something that we can work into the strategies here. So thanks. Yeah, Teresa.
I'm trying to put my hand down, so
oh no, that's
give me a minute to figure it out.
I just
don't not working
anyway. Yeah, Teresa.
Oh, there it is.
Yes, hi. I totally agree with both Dexter and Serena. And to add to that, I would love to see some more targeted information or education to landlords and property owners around these laws as well. And I would love to see more regional collaboration. You shouldn't be protected in one city and then go to, let's say, 104th and Van Ness, where you're just outside of city district and have a totally different set of protection. I would love to see more uniformed, collaborative rental protections for folks, as well as some additional targeted education specifically to landlords.
Okay. Are there any particular types of landlords? Would that be smaller landlords, or you see it kind of across the board need for more education?
It should be across the board need for everyone. Big property management companies, smaller mom and pop landlords, or maybe someone who owns maybe one or two properties. Across the board education.
Okay, thanks. And yeah, I think your point about kind of your rights and maybe resources that you might have changing with jurisdictional boundaries has also been something that's come up a few times in these meetings, that people, you don't necessarily think it when you're crossing out of the city boundaries, that your rights or resources that may be available to you are changing, and some need for collaboration there to help folks know what's available to them. Thanks. Anyone else? And Ivory shared in the chat some agreement with Dexter's comments and with Teresa's, and a group related to small rental property owners. So thank you. Any other kind of thoughts about what will make kind of existing or new tenant protections more successful? Maybe thinking too about source of income protection. So that's something that's a law citywide and statewide, that you shouldn't face housing discrimination because of your source of income. But, you know, we have heard in probably every meeting that we've had that this is still something that's happening. Are there additional enforcement activities you'd like to see the city take? And I think Raquel, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I'm gonna put my hand up now. So here's one of the things that I've been advocating for. I just joined. I was on the other one and I wanted to go on both. So I'm Raquel Williams Jones from Can I Live? We're a public housing tenants association. And so banks write transactions, Section 8 home ownership. That's a big, big, big deal. The fact that you could take a voucher and purchase your home with the voucher. The challenge is banks are not writing these transactions. So, you know, if HUD is saying federally that we would pay your mortgage for 15 years and or 30 years if you're disabled, then why aren't banks writing the transaction? So if you're going to say income discrimination, then banks would have to also, there has to be some kind of consideration, rating metrics or something where banks are held accountable, even though they're private in a public market and this is public funds and stuff like that. They have to be incentivized and or something to write the transactions, because if you're thinking on one hand, we wouldn't need so much source of income protection if once they get the voucher, they can't find any place safe, adequate, you know, affordable to move, because people could say, I don't want you in my neighborhood. I don't want you in my house. So guess what? We could solve all that. Get your own house. As far out as you could go. I don't care. You know, find the land, find the property, let HUD co-sign on those loans. So, you know, sometimes what frustrates me about these types of meetings, I feel like we're trying to fix a problem in a vacuum, city by city, when you have systemic practices on levels such as the federal government, because it could be, this is not rocket science. I promise you, this is very, very simple. And so I don't know how you make a bank write a transaction, because to me, that's discriminatory. What you're saying is that same redlining, that same blockbusting that existed a long time ago, where the government and the banks were complicit in the denial of housing discrimination, or were complicit in the promotion of housing segregation back then, it still exists right now. So let's address it, then we don't have to count on failed income discrimination, source of income hypotheses at this point.
Sure. So enable more folks to move into homeownership versus, you know, having to use a voucher to rent. Yeah, so there's some limitations to what this study can do in terms of impacting, you know, it will impact local policy, but not at the national level. But certainly.
What about the vouchers that the city gets? Doesn't the city itself get vouchers that they manage? And it's still, so there's twofold. The city gets vouchers that they create on themselves. So that could be something, you know, or the county, the city, they can create that stipulation on the vouchers that they, you know, allocate funding for. But for studies like this, that is paid from a federal entity, it's like, you know, you're paid from, you know, HUD is paying for these studies. And so it would be nice if the studies that the HUD is paying for could actually
impact HUD.
Hold them accountable.
Yeah,
right.
Sure. Let's see. Teresa, I think you've had your hands up for a minute, so go there.
I just wanted to respond to your question. I 100%, I agree again with Ms. Raquel as well. And to add to that, I would like to see, you know, we've declared, Los Angeles and a couple of other cities have declared a state of emergency when it comes to homelessness. So how do we use that to make some public service announcements regarding tenant protection and landlord discriminatory acts. Like when COVID came out, you could turn on your TV and you could see some sort of commercial or advertisement related to COVID. Why aren't we treating homelessness and rental protections and these laws, these things that folks should not be doing, especially when it comes to income source discrimination? Why aren't we treating those things the same way? So that's something I would love to see, more advertised public service announcements that tackle these issues.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So kind of like large scale advertising that residents throughout the city will be able to see, if I'm understanding you correctly. Wanted to read a couple things from the chat. So Ivory mentioned kind of going back to Raquel's suggestion that so banks do have requirements under the Community Reinvestment Act to look at how they are lending money. There's also laws that require them to be non-discriminatory in their home loans. So that's something that we will be looking at data for, just in terms of what home loan, who has applied for home loans and how have, what do those application approval and denial rates look like? And there are places that have put strategies in place, okay, we're going to spend our city funds at a bank that is, not discriminating against people, that has, passed these kind of different checks that we have. So there are some strategies there, and I think something we can look at too. Let's see, a comment from Serena about sharing information through social media and commercials about source of income. So really a focus on getting the word out, I think connects with what Teresa was saying. And Ashley mentioned a counter I have come in and encountered clients applying for apartments with Section 8 and landlords asking that they make 3 times the rent, which has come up in several of our meetings as well. So that even they're not saying they won't accept a voucher, but they're putting an income requirement so high that someone with a voucher is going to be disqualified based on income. So yes, I think that's something that we're looking at. And if there's any kind of policy ideas or strategies that you'd like to see the city take on that, I'm certainly happy to hear them. Let's see, Arturo, I think you've had your hands up for a while.
Yes, frankly, we are waiting for an effective assistance program on the part of whomever. I mean, might be city, might be state, might be federal, whatever. Because the previous programs, frankly, didn't help much of our Latino and African-American community in terms of preventing homelessness and evictions. And I'm saying this because we got to a point in which there was, we were calling people in need, to come over into our office, and we, in front of them, called for legal assistance. There was none at all. We called several entities that were supposed to be involved or receiving funding to provide this kind of eviction prevention assistance. And also, we predicted that the family homelessness was going to augment, and it did. People don't know what to do, and here in South Los Angeles region, we saw cribs, we saw mattresses, we saw almost a new furniture sometimes, and from people that were evicted. And frankly, we don't know in what circumstances, but we did that for people to know that there wasn't nobody taking care of these cases. So the only thing we're hoping for is to have a real effective program with the necessary assistance, and not a fantastic result.
Okay. So that the existing programs are not working, you call them and people don't answer or don't get back to you. Is that? That's right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely key input to have and something that the city can hopefully develop some strategies to put more funding or something in order to expand access to legal protection. Because that's a program that should be functioning. You should be able to access that legal assistance. Thank you. Kristen.
Yeah, so with regards to unlawful source of income discrimination, some policies that have been considered at the state level that perhaps the city could either support or look to ways they could adopt locally is around preventing certain credit checks, background checks for people who have housing vouchers. When applying for units, that's another tool that we see landlords use in addition to requiring, more rent or greater security deposit. It's not really practical for our clients to have credit histories or certain employment histories or things, and that's the very reason, they're experiencing homelessness. So there's current legislation being proposed at the state level that would do that statewide, that's been introduced in the past. So the state could look to support those types of measures or see what they could do locally. I think also, I know that the Civil Rights Department found that recently about half of the properties they tested locally found evidence of unlawful discrimination. And I know statewide they're looking at where investigation enforcement would be appropriate, but when those violations are found, the city should have penalties for those property owners, given how blatant it is. And then last, the use of master leasing could also be a policy tool where if the city and or working with service providers and others essentially leased out entire apartment complexes, then you could facilitate more access for voucher holders rather than having to rely solely on the private market to accept people. So those are a few suggestions.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are great ideas and definitely things that we can talk about with the city and see how those could be worked into strategies. Thank you. Let me ask, so one of the things that we've been hearing about is maybe some issues with the coordinated entry system. How well do you feel like CES works to evaluate and connect households in need of assistance with the most appropriate resources? Let's see, Arturo, did you have a comment on this one?
No.
Okay. Maybe Dexter then.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think that CES is often not the best resource for households, particularly those who have never experienced homelessness before, or whose experience of homelessness is very limited. I think that CES can be a very burdensome experience and particularly alienating experience for many people who go through it. We have this comment from our members that spy all the time, and particularly in circumstances where something like the problem-solving funds are a helpful in-place step. I think that it would be very valuable for folks to not have to go through the whole CES experience to be able to access a lot of these resources.
Okay.
Not that I don't think it can't be helpful at all, don't get me wrong, but
sure.
I think there's value in the CES system, but I think for folks who we can address through like a lot of kind of basic housing issues, that it's not necessary to get everyone into CES. It doesn't make sense.
Okay. Yeah, I think certainly, yeah, we're understanding that we're looking for ways to improve it. So yeah, not taking any issue with your comments or complaints. Happy to have your ideas for improvement. Yeah, Erica?
An echo of Dexter, I agree that it's a pretty flawed system right now. I know that LAWSA is taking a lot of steps to look at that. I'm on an access and assessment policy work group where we're trying to figure out what would be a better way to engage, at what point you would use tools, as opposed to just having an encounter and putting a tool and then matching you to something that's really showing not to work.
Okay.
And then to echo the problem solving funds, where we found them to be super effective and just actually got some flexibility with LAWSA, was being able to tie them directly to a program like our Campus Peer Navigator, which is really a community college homeless liaison. But we were able to embed some of our contract funds and turn them over to problem solving funds. And now that person is able to directly help his constituents, isn't right, his students.
Yeah, sure.
By basically diverting them from most of the resources. You can't divert them from the system because they need to be logged and counted and we need to capture our work, but they don't necessarily need to be connected with all of the other pieces of the system.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So kind of continuing some flexibility there in terms of who goes through the entire CS system and who maybe you can divert into other programs or solutions, resources. Yeah, Terry?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Terry. I work directly with homeless individuals who identify as TGI. TGI stands for trans, gender nonconforming, and intersex community. Regarding the homeless population within the TGI, I do directly work with the LAWSA CS workers who come to our organization, conduct CS assessment at our location, and meet with our client for an assessment up to 30 minutes or 45 minutes at the most, which is kind of like they use the long-term assessment tool. One problematic issue that I've been looking at for the past year, I'm very grateful that the LAWSA CS team, at least 4 or 5, come to our organization. In the last year, they come once a month to our organization for at least an hour and a half. And a total of 111 individuals who identify as TGI have been assessed. Out of the 111, a total of now that I just completed 7 out of 111 who have been successfully matched. However, the 7 individuals who identify as TGI when it comes to housing matching under the LAWSA with other housing agency providers for homeless housing don't really necessarily fit the needs for those who identify as TGI, because we're talking about program shelters who are really not sensitive or open to providing direct services for TGI who are currently homeless, or program shelters and transitional housing. Our organization, we have a transitional house that are directly help those are in need. We have at least 12 beds within our own house. However, that's not enough. 12 beds in our house is not enough, and we need additional housing agencies to really assist our TGI population. I previously mentioned of the 7 have failed to leave the program shelters and come back to our organization asking for help for reassistance to be reassessed with the LAWSA. And I have to be the one directly calling back to the CES team and say, I'm sorry, this individual had left, or they get a call back and they say they left because wherever the program shelters are being housed at, they're faced with discrimination from program shelter staff, program shelter clients and individuals, as well as the security guard personnel who are not open-minded to working directly with TGI who are currently housed and homeless. And so my concern is that this is just like an ongoing vicious cycle to continue to re-traumatize our TGI population who are currently housed within our population. By all means, as a provider, I have many hats that I have on my head, not only as a case manager, not only as a program coordinator, but also as a navigator for housing specialists for our clients and many other stuff. My compassion and my passion working with TGI population is that having the need to really see our clients to really successfully be stable with housing. It's really difficult when the program shelters and transitional housing aside from our organizations are really not at will to really help or provide direct services that are safe for our TGI population. Sometimes it really gets to my heart that our clients have to come back and say that they're being discriminated, or someone who identifies as trans women are placed in a men's facility, someone who is identifying as a trans man are placed in a women's facility. So if the LA Housing, even under the LASA, who is the main portal administration to provide these services, I think it's always important. I've always said and voiced continuously and to be heard. You know, if these program shelters and transitional housing have adequate safe housing space for TGA population, and also what do you call specific funding that are set aside in these programs specifically for TGA who are in the need of housing, and all across the board. Not only this also includes the managers and the landlord under the LA City Housing Authority to have sensitivity training, harassment training, and how to deal effectively with clients, individuals, and also with tenants within our habitats or apartment dwellings. I mean, even myself, just as a provider here, I'm sitting behind here, I am being affected by my own landlord and where I say it under the LA Housing Authority, that all of our tenants, I'm one of those tenants that are being mandated to buy an insurance. So I have to pay additional insurance on a monthly basis aside within our rent. If we are not to buy these insurance, we are going to be asked to be evicted, or we're going to be asked to be moved out to another location, and that's not fair. That should be part of the insurance under the landlord. But all of us, me, myself, I'm mandated to buy insurance. And now I'm having this additional insurance company is billing me $300 in addition to what I'm paying for the $12 for the insurance. So it's just really not fair. So aside under the LA Housing, I'm just expressing my concerns, even as a housing provider. I can say that even for our clients who are chronically homeless, who identify as TGI, and I can't imagine how much more they are living on the street. Rather to be homeless on the street so they don't have to face discrimination and having to deal with a lot of these negative stigma.
Yeah, thank you. I think your points of kind of that very low placement rate, and then even once folks are somewhere having to come back because they're not, that's not a good place for them, certainly is really important feedback for us to have, and hopefully can be worked into some strategies related to what resources are available for folks who are homeless. I'm not sure, I don't know, Joel, if you know anything about the insurance that Terry was mentioning, but that may be something to bring up to the housing department or their renter hotline. And I think we have that resource we can connect you with if needed. Dee Danelle?
Hello, hi, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I had a couple of questions, or a question for those who do know and are more familiar with the CES coordinated entry system process. I am with Abundant Housing LA. However, this question here is coming from, or I'm asking this question in the capacity of not only a resident, but someone who was formerly homeless on the street, in cars, and in shelters before. So I unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I'm not sure, I did not go through the CES process during my time in which I was homeless, in which was sporadic, in which, you know, I had fluctuations in my personal life. However, the CES, the resources that are available within that program, are they attached to mandates and or benchmarks, or are they at the discretion of a said case manager and or group? Maybe this is an open question for the folks in the room.
Can I just chime in based on, this is Terry, based on my experience here working at our organization, working with our homeless clients. Yes, these are fairly new for the CES under the LASA in the last 7 years. And now it really has changed. If you want to go to any shelter programs or treatment facilities or other housing services, they're always rerouting us to go back to LASA to get an CS assessment. And they will not allow to do any intake unless they go through the CES for assessment. So it goes under the LASA. So LASA is the main primary organization entity that homeless individuals have to go through the portal to get it, to even get a score to be matched for housing placement.
So excuse me, so the CES is actually the scoring, that's the name of the scoring system?
The coordinated entry assessment is really based on the chronically homeless with the amount of years where you're staying at within the SPY area. It's just based on the scoring or the matching of the tool. That is going to be direct. All the workers are doing is entering it into the assessment tool, and then it pulls out to program services for shelter programs. All LASA does is enter the information, and that's all they do, and then just move on to another individual and process all the assessment for housing matching, and that's it. They have nothing to do with other program shelters or other program services. They're the ones who get the incoming flex of the individuals of their intakes.
Got you. Okay. Okay, so that does make sense. Okay, so it's a scoring system in which I actually did go through that. So I did take a CES test. I was given a score, and then I was supposedly, or I was said to have been referred out to other agencies that could offer programs that I qualified for given the score. And so my question in regards to funding availability and viable results out of that funding. As a great state of California, I always say, and I will continue to say, we have the money, we can do it. So why hasn't it been done yet? And I guess so my suggestion with regards to this topic here would be to include benchmarks. Benchmarks on the results of how that funding is being used, in turn to justify the need for more funding. Because one thing that I went through as a homeless and unsheltered individual was a lack of morale in some of the people, supervisors and case managers included, and their attitudes and tonality towards myself and other folks, in which I could only imagine those who had dealt with, those who are in recovery and or are still dealing with unhealthy habits such as alcohol and drugs and other undesirable incidences in their lifetime, and how they could perceive that and may even be afraid to speak up in fear that they may lose their place on a list or even opportunities to be referred to adequate care. So I definitely suggest that I believe there should be benchmarks in place for all agencies, whether that's a framework that is, set for LA County, and or if it's just set for the specific agencies themselves, in which assert that they assist with homelessness, the homelessness population and issues, as this, the homelessness crisis is something that it's going to require a multi-pronged solution. including housing production as well.
Mhm.
And which I'll later, but in terms of quantitative results, qualitative should be prioritized as well, because it does matter. It does make a difference, especially given a person's history. Because someone with mental health issues is definitely going to need more resources and more care than someone who may just need a leg up, you know, and help in finding the right position or the right job that will provide viable income so that they can afford housing, of course. And, you know, that could branch out to a ton of other discussions. But I definitely support benchmarks and earmarks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that there's a really wide range of support that folks will need. So making sure that they're matched appropriately, but yeah, kind of capturing that in benchmarks, some goals, and see how many people are being assisted and things
Just
like
to
that.
Yeah,
do a
the
quick
training
comment
is
also.
definitely. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to comment that, you know, training is very should be prioritized as well, because it's not just a humanity thing, and you know, all the bumper sticker statements that I've heard before, but it's deeper than that. It's not just a job. When positions in which dealing with the homelessness population and mental health population, it's not just a job. This is the livelihood of some folks, and regardless of what they've been through. You know, discerning who deserves what in this and that and when and where is not within the job description of the employees at these agencies. So I would love to see changes within that as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think what you're bringing up, and Terry, what you mentioned as well, maybe goes back to another question that we had on our agenda. That was really how homeless services could be improved to include more of a racial equity focus and ensure inclusivity. I think, Terry, you spoke pretty well to inclusivity for transgender. Sorry, go ahead.
I have already voiced before, aside from this table discussion, is that the assessment tool is very long and it's very lengthy. I think it's time to revise the community level engagement, to revise or do a revision of the new assessment tool. Make it short. I think that the assessment tool that they use right now is really based on chronically homeless. That includes the mentally illness, chemical dependency, substance addiction, as well as domestic violence, and also for KU, for disabled also as well. So I think that the assessment tool needs to be revised at a shorter and to be inclusive of the language inclusivity for LGBT and TGI population, because nowhere in that assessment tool, because there's two revisions that I worked out of that I just saw, is that it has no LGBT TGI language that are specifically towards getting our TGI population housed, because when they send it into the assessment tool, the housing providers are getting the information. They don't even know who the person is. If they identify as hetero or cis or even TGI or LGBT, they don't know until they are matched. And whoever they're meeting with the assessment with the intake case manager, and then that's when they see, do they really qualify for the program, and then they are bumped out of the matching listing. Prior also to the one to previously I worked with and coordinated with the Bridge program and the people concerned for the case management supportive services under the Los Angeles Department of Mental Health for boarding care for housing services. And that also has changed too now. Even those you have to go under through the LASA for the CES assessment. And it makes it more challenging to get our clients into getting the help that they need.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that the tool needs to be inclusive from a starting point. Arturo, did you have any comments on this? Your hand might have been up from a previous question.
No, I just have one question, and that is if the processing process, the processing for people to actually get access to affordable housing within the public housing developments in Watts, particularly, you know, as you know, we are surrounded for 3 major housing developments. My question is there any kind of assistance for people who are in an emergency situation? For example, yesterday, 2 elderly family individuals, ladies, came to ask, you know, for some assistance to get access to housing because they were in the brink to being evicted. And the only thing I could do is to refer them to a family resource center. But they have already gone to that place.
Sure.
And they didn't receive any kind of assistance. Is there any way for sick or very old people to for a process to be expedited and give them access before they are thrown into the streets?
I don't know that there is. Serena, I don't know if you know of any way that the housing authority would expedite any applications for seniors in emergency situations.
No, the pretty much, I mean, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority has the homeless prevention program. So that will be where they would need to get some assistance that way, but we don't have any emergency housing at our program, you know, here at the HACLA for Section 8. Many housing authorities open up their waiting lists at different times, and so sometimes if they're closed, the families are their only option is either low-income housing or connecting with LASA with their homeless programs, because we get referrals for that, and or the homeless prevention program, which LASA has these service planning area leads that will reach out, or they can reach out to them to see if they qualify to get some help that way.
Thank you, Serena.
So in fact, there is some way for at least give hope for this family to not being more victimized by the waiting process, be qualified, or to give them emergency access to affordable housing?
I don't think it would be through the housing authority. It'd be through the other avenues that Serena mentioned. Yeah, thank you.
I had a quick question for Arturo. Do you know if the 2 elderly that you met with yesterday, are they currently in a senior living environment?
You know what? We didn't touch that point because they were so desperate that you know, we talked about too many things and the reasons they probably become evicted people, and they were desperate to find a shelter or a place to be once they are evicted.
Well, I was asking because if they are currently in a senior living environment, I mean, that is good that they would be living in a senior living environment. But the bad thing is that if they are faced with income discrimination because of the market rate for senior living, even for low income housing, it is at a higher rate, and elderly on a fixed income, whether they're on SSI or retirement, they don't meet that threshold of really, you know, affording their monthly rent, even for low income housing. But even for a senior or elderly population, they're faced with these income discrimination as well too. I know that with LASA can be able to assist through the assessment tool for elderly to be housed in a place that they can find adequate housing for them to be in a safe place.
And I think we have your email and may be able to connect you with some resources after the meeting to those that Serena or Terry mentioned.
Appreciate it, deeply appreciate it.
Thank you. I think we maybe have time for one or two more comments. Teresa, I saw your hand up, and also Dee Danelle.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment specifically around what like housing providers could do around inclusive efforts. I think one of the things that I think about and I think would be helpful is if we stop putting the bulk of the work on service providers. These are systemic issues that need to be addressed on a systemic level. And I think putting that on the service providers, I mean, we're dealing with what we can in a system that's already oppressive. And so we're trying to navigate that. And so it's coming to the service providers, asking us what we can do. How about we approach this from a systemic level? This country was founded on laws that were able to provide advantages for a group of people. Why aren't we taking that same approach to address some of these issues? So I think we need to address this from a systemic level. And I think it should not be the burden of the service provider to fix this. This needs to be done on a national, state, city, systemic level.
Thank you. I think that's a great point. And I think that's kind of the goal of this study, is to come up with ways that the city can address its systems, or the housing authority can change its systems to address some of these issues rather than, kind of the burdens falling on service providers. We have to go back into our group, but yeah, Dee Danelle, if you have a quick comment.
Yeah, well, actually, I have a question. If you're able to answer it, with regards to your goal number 5, expand access to opportunity for protected classes, and then it has a list of strategies. My question is, will protected classes be prioritized in the event that the data does not show that these protected classes are not overrepresented in certain metrics?
I'm not sure I understand your question. So I think when we're talking about a goal like that, so a lot of times it would be making sure that folks are able to either access neighborhoods that have high levels of opportunity. So being able to move to any area that someone would like and be able to access those opportunities, or making sure that if there are neighborhoods in the city that lack some types of opportunities or resources, looking for ways to bolster them there. So kind of opportunity, whether you're moving to it because you want to move somewhere, or whether it's opportunity in the place that you live, and increasing access to like good jobs or job training programs or good schools, increasing environmental health in neighborhoods where that's low, or access to transit, any kind of those kind of things.
Okay, access, right. And I see you have the TOC, Transit Oriented Communities Initiative there, and Measure JJJ. However, in terms of the housing developments that come about, taking advantage of those initiatives, there are still some areas in which are being overlooked. And currently in South LA, to give you an example, I'm located in South LA, Congressional District 54, and there are still, there are concerns from the residents here that are worried about displacement, and also the entire lack of any type of contracts and or agreements with regards to new businesses that come about, and the construction companies involved in the said housing developments, and agreements regarding employment within our district specifically as they come about. And so there are great lacks of that, well, They don't even exist with regards to my with CD8, to give you an example. And so the question was with regards to the usage of the term protected class. There are certain groups in which that are considered a protected class under our laws here in America. However, there are data sets that show that other groups are more rent burdened, are incurring and surviving through generational poverty. I could go on, but I don't want to, get all into it here. However, how do you all discern with regards to distribution of needs and access and who to prioritize if the data says otherwise?
So I think that we're looking at data, but also hearing from folks, and we've talked, I think, kind of like you mentioned, South Central LA focus on displacement and kind of a need for more employment opportunities and making sure that resources are within the neighborhood is something that we've heard. So it will be kind of a combination of data and hearing from people to make sure that we're encouraging opportunity in neighborhoods throughout the city. I'm not sure if I'm adequately answering your question, but happy to talk about it more. But I think
I would love to. I'm ready to go, but I know we run out of time, so I will definitely follow up with an email.
Yeah,
following
thank
this.
you. Yeah, happy to do that. So we're gonna close the breakout rooms now and jump back to our other session. But thank you very much for your input and definitely happy to continue that conversation with you. Just want to make sure we're connecting back with our other group.
SurveyMonkey. Oh, great. We also have the SurveyMonkey response form posted in the chat. So you can provide any written responses if you want to kind of expand further or just put your responses in the form too. But we definitely encourage everybody to just kind of unmute and jump into the discussion today because we don't have too giant of a group. So I think that's great. And we'll be leaving that form open for several days following the meeting. So feel free to share more ideas, kind of wait until after the meeting to do that as well. But I'll go ahead and just jump into our first discussion question. So the first question is, community meeting participants have identified rent increases and potential evictions as major barriers to housing stability in LA. Does that align with your experience? And feel free to just kind of unmute and jump in. I think we can definitely do that.
Can you repeat that?
So community meeting participants identified rent increases and potential evictions as major barriers to housing stability in LA. Does that align with your experience, and kind of let us know why or why not? And we're also posting these questions in the chat as well. So I know sometimes it's kind of a lot to listen to, but if you want to kind of review them there too.
I'll go ahead and chime in. My name is Maria Barahona from Haven Hills. We're a domestic violence shelter based in the San Fernando Valley. I would say that we actually operate a housing first program. So we help domestic violence survivors with housing assistance and all of that. And I think the number one request that we do receive is evictions. I would say maybe like 85% is preventing eviction as opposed to moving folks in. And right now with all of the protections that were lifted, that seems to be the big concern with a lot of our clients across the board.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Amado-Sprega and I work at CAST. We work with survivors of trafficking, and I echo exactly what Maria just said. We also run a rental assistance program, and we have seen more need for eviction prevention than moving. I mean, almost to move in is almost impossible, to be honest, for several reasons, the cost being one of them, but also the areas that are even affordable aren't safe.
Okay. And so that's moving someone into a new place kind of following an eviction, or just kind of finding housing in general?
Finding housing in general, whether it's because they've been evicted or they're coming from a shelter, like one of our shelter programs, or but yeah, it's almost impossible. to find housing.
And I would add to that, my name is Raquel Williams-Jones, and I'm from Can I Live? We're a public housing tenants association. And so a lot of the moms that live in public housing, most of the time, the men that they have in the house are not supposed to be there. And so they're violating the lease. And so sometimes, in most cases, when that male gets, out of line, they're almost trapped because they don't want to tell that they're being abused because it will make them lose. So they can't even access the violence against women services or act or protections because they allow someone to live in their home that's not officially on the lease. And so sometimes overall, her inability to move forward, that's not, so I'm about to layer this. Her inability to move forward because when she works, she's penalized. So as soon as she works, she has 10 days to report that income. And her 10 days says, we're going to cut your food stamps, we're going to cut the Medicaid, the TANF, the child care, anything you receive, you're getting cut. So in order for her to be self-sufficient, she either has to stay home and do nothing. And how do you live without anything? And so what we're finding, a lot of women are subjecting themselves to men who are not necessarily married or committed to the household to that degree, simply because they're trying to maintain. So if women were actually able, moms that occupy public housing, Section 8, well, really public housing, but also Section 8 too, if they were able to move forward with protections, they would be safer from the violence of men, not violate their leases, and wouldn't need to subject their lives to an abusive male just for provision. I know
Okay.
that was a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So income limitations for public housing is kind of maybe a barrier to both.
No, it's not income limitations, it's protections once you say you want to move forward. So it's self-sufficiency protections. So once they work, they should be protected and not cut off. So like they call it the welfare cliff. They experience all of these cliffs and reductions and benefits that far outweigh the wage that they're earning. I don't know what you would call it in your world, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for clarifying. Okay. What about, so we've talked about kind of eviction as an issue, things leading to that. What about rent increases on that side? Is that something that you're seeing as a major barrier to housing stability?
I think that's definitely across the board. And unfortunately, as the rent increases and they're more vulnerable to evictions, I think the two play in together.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Alice. I'm the Associate Director for the Housing Department with the Genesee Center. And we cover all of the community, but LA, we have a lot of housing assistance for our programs, rapid rehousing. It has been really hard with the increase in rent out here. Singles are going for like $1,500 and up when they used to be like $1,300 or $1,200. Clients are renting rooms for $1,700. So it's just been really hard helping the underserved community find places for women and children to stay. And they want, 2 times, 3 times the amount for you to make when the clients don't make that kind of money. Some families are on the welfare to work program, or they don't have jobs where they're making $25 to $30 an hour. And then you're trying to get them in a place that they can afford and still have normality. So even though you have all these grants coming in and you want to do the housing assistance, now that they have the management companies taking over and you don't have a lot of the mom and pops, it's making it really harder because the rent used to be able to get a 1-bedroom for $1,500. It's really hard now. You're not getting that. We're finding people that are finding singles for $1,700 and thinking, oh, this is good. That's the best they can do.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So the management companies taking over kind of complexes that maybe had previously been a little bit more affordable.
In COVID, I think COVID, when we had the rentals assistance, a lot of people, they worked the system. Like a lot of landlords that we used to work with that were more considerate towards survivors of domestic violence, they worked the system. Instead of paying the rent, a lot of landlords didn't get the rent. Like at that time, you could let the landlord get the money for the rental assistance, or the client could get it. The clients would get the money and weren't paying the landlords. Or the COVID, the landlord said that the clients weren't even trying to pay on their rent. So now we're going back and forth. We have landlords going to court, waiting to evict. It's a big mess. So it's making it harder for us to advocate or get them to trust the programs that are out there because they felt like they've been burned.
Okay.
Jessica, can I also add that I think what also contributes to housing stability for survivors is that we're removing them from their support systems. As a survivor, you depend on those people around you to sort of help you through what you're going through with childcare and, just rides and things like that. So we're in the Valley where it's really expensive. For a 1-bedroom unit, it's about $1,850 and up. So a lot of our clients have to move out of the area and they're moving away from families and any type of those supports, which in the future can also impact their housing stability in the long run.
Okay, thank you. What about how well do you think new City of LA renter protections like the Just Cause eviction protection ordinance, relocation assistance, eviction protections for tenants that are behind 1 month of fair market rent will serve households that are at risk of homelessness? Or what gaps might remain? We just posted it in the chat too. I can repeat if needed.
For me, I think the relocation assistance is the issue. Because again, you're sort of forcing survivors to move away from their communities. And that's just wrong. That's the big issue. I'm not too familiar with the Just Cause eviction protection ordinance. And then with the 1 month behind, 1 month, 2 months, it's $1 million. So I think 1 month, well, it might help. It's still not that quick to get caught up when you're relying on agencies to support you with that rent. And you're still just not in that place where you can afford the rent on your own.
So you're seeing kind of with, if someone gets relocation assistance, they might not be able to locate kind of in the same area that they were before necessarily.
Most likely not, just because to move in is expensive. Like in our area, for example, it's $1,850 for a single. So a lot of our clients are having to go into Antelope Valley or, on the east side. And, again, you're removing them from their communities.
Okay.
We're also seeing a lot of clients move out of state.
Okay. And the Just Cause eviction protection ordinance is, it prohibits terminations of tenancies without just cause and requires relocation assistance for no fault eviction. So that's kind of just an overview of what that entails. You can't just terminate someone's tenancy if someone's coming in.
Yeah, and I'll just add also the Just Cause covers not just those properties that are under the city's rent stabilization program or RSO. It covers all rental property in the city.
Thanks, Nancy. So what gaps will remain and how can the city better ensure enforcement of these and existing renter protections?
big, complicated question.
Thanks, Nancy. So Nancy had posted the link to the just cause eviction ordinance.
I mean, when you talk about better enforcement, for me, when a client comes to us with they're being evicted for XYZ issue, internally, and it could be we don't have the experts on our staff, but I wouldn't know where to send them. My case managers probably do, but I do in this case. So I think maybe just more information on how, like, who do you go to when something like this is happening?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so if I can add, so Maria, you said it's unknown as far as where to refer people to for those who are perhaps being threatened by eviction of some kind, right?
Yeah, like I know, like we work with a couple like legal agencies that we usually go to for if a client's being evicted, and they work with them. Like I can't remember the name, but there's a couple of legal agencies we have MOUs with. But other than that, I don't know if are there any like local government city offices that we should be referring to that maybe can move things faster. And it's also a very timely process.
Exactly. So the city does have a state has the eviction defense program, and it's actually I guess the city component of what the county has under State House LA. So we do have a program in place. It was launched during COVID. So it does include assistance with eviction prevention, education, and information for tenants, as well as assistance with any unlawful detainers, any emergency rental assistance, or any rental assistance beyond just perhaps a 3-day notice. And then also the program does include, if necessary, case management services for individuals. So it is working with our legal aid contractor, Legal Aid Foundation of LA, LAFLA. And they have a number of other organizations that they're working with to provide legal services. And so the case management services is something that's being offered by some of the family source centers that the city has. So if necessary, when they come in for intake and after that process, if it's deemed that they need case management services, they'll be referred to one of the participating family source centers to receive case management services, as well as a little bit additional assistance if necessary with rent, and then even addressing any other issues that people have, that either it will help them remain housed or to help them to find other housing. So that program is currently underway. So I'll try to look for the link to the webpage and share it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What I hear though from like my case managers is that trying to access those resources just takes a really long time. And when you got like a 3-day notice, trying to get someone to help you, it's sort of by the time it happens, it's already after the fact.
Well, yeah, of course. And time is everything, right? So, and that's what the program does help with in terms of addressing just that 3-day notices, and they need to pay their rent, whether if they're behind, if it's a matter of responding within a day or 2 turnaround, what have you. There's people, there's staff that's able to assist them, and there's rental assistance just for that particular purpose.
Yeah, if you can post the link that'll be really helpful.
Sure.
Great. Sorry, Angela, were you saying something?
Sure. I don't know if there are any providers here, but there's also the Survivors First program, which I understood that one's primary goals is to keep the person in the neighborhood while they're trying to, assist them with being safe and so forth. So I will try to find some information on that as well.
Okay. You said the Survivors First program? Okay.
Yeah, we operate one of those programs as well. There's a lot of restrictions, and also to stay in LA is really expensive. So
Yeah, we also participate in Survivor First.
Okay.
And to be honest, because we have to go by fair market rates from HUD, it's not realistic to what rental units go for in LA. So that's a difficulty as well.
Okay. And so you end up placing people outside of the city, is that? Or what's generally your experience?
For Survivor for us at Haven Hills, we tend to use that funding to keep people in housing. So for folks that are moving, if we're able to find a unit that they can afford after the 6 months, because it is a 6-month program that they're eligible for that assistance, then they move in. Usually they come back to us, and then we got to use other funding outside of that to help them. But it's a 6-month program within the city of LA, and or they relocate outside, which is also allowable if it's a safety reason.
Great, thank you. Anything else on these first questions? Anything else the city can do to better ensure enforcement of renter protections? Okay, we can always come back to that one as well. The next question is thinking of barriers to permanent housing access. Community meeting participants have noted source of income discrimination and barriers due to credit histories, past eviction histories, and low incomes. What other barriers do you see? And are there ways the city can improve enforcement of source of income protection? What can the city do about these barriers that exist?
Sometimes for us, a barrier, in addition to these, is if they find out they're survivors of trafficking, then they're discriminated against.
Okay.
And past eviction and credit is big for our clients as well, because a lot of times that happens during their trafficking, where their trafficker has put leases into their names or taken out credit cards in their name. So that's been a barrier also for our survivors.
Okay, thank you.
I'm also the lack of employment.
Okay. Yeah, okay, lack of employment as a barrier to
a history of employment that you need to get in.
Okay, history of employment to share with landlords, things like that.
Yes, it's a good one.
Are there ways the city can improve enforcement of source of income protection? Are there approaches the city or HACLA should take to mitigate any of the other barriers?
Are there any laws on how much I guess what the income requirement is to move into an apartment? Like you were talking about, sometimes clients to show 3-4 months that they make 3-4 months types of rent to move into an apartment. Are there any type of restrictions on that within the city?
Certain, it depends on the housing type. If they're moving in a covenant rent restricted affordable housing, then they do need to be at a certain income level to qualify for that, to be eligible for that housing type, yes. And that will be clear in terms of during the application period. So there will be a verification of that income level. And then just in terms of, with certain housing that is like under housing authority and is receiving the housing authority payment assistance, or so the HAP portion of which HACLA is paying for, and then you have the tenant that's paying 30% of their income. There is a requirement there So at the initial time of applying for housing, they have to be able to demonstrate their income. And then every year after that, they have the recertification process that happens in terms of rechecking their income to ensure that they're still income eligible. So that is required because you have those particular projects that are funded with certain funding sources, and you have those requirements, yes.
So what about in the private market? Like our private landlords or private property managers?
Right.
Restricted,
So
they can ask whatever?
Yeah, so if it's a private market and it's just at that point you have to demonstrate you're able to afford the rent, right?
At whatever they're asking for?
Right.
Okay,
right.
so that's what I'm asking. There's no restriction on how much they can ask for to move in.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
So they may, I don't know, may ask, right, in terms of any payment, any salary, any wage stubs or anything that they received, maybe last 4 weeks of payment, something like that. They may ask to prove that there's that stable employment there.
Yeah.
Are you and I guess in continuation with Jessica's question, are there any specific experiences that you all have had in working with folks in terms of landlords or property owners rejecting any third-party assistance, that's third-party payment assistance that DV survivors have? Not necessarily even Section 8, but any, perhaps maybe it's, a one-time financial assistance that is provided to someone to help them move in. Do you find that those types of, those forms of payment are being rejected or being pretty much they're refusing to rent to them because they're coming in with that?
No, not anymore. I will say before COVID, it was really hard to get someone to take third-party payment, but now it seems like it's not really an issue anymore.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've had a few, but not a lot for the most part, especially because we can pay up to 6 months. We'll pay it
Okay.
one payment. So that's very enticing to landlords.
Absolutely.
Getting 6 months. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's good to hear. So Courtney was asking, just to repeat the question. So are there ways the city can improve enforcement of source of income protection? Are there approaches the city or HACLA should take to mitigate any of the other barriers as well that we noted, like credit history, past eviction, low incomes, and other ones?
Oh, okay. So my only answer to that would have been that a lot of my clients are, even if they don't have any eviction or their income is okay, their main issue is having to deal with the 2 times the rental amount, and they don't make enough, or they'll end up being in a continuous homeless cycle.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you think the city could do to improve enforcement? Or I guess it's a good sign that you're seeing that the payments are being accepted. So maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, the hard part is having them being able to qualify for units. That's the hard part. I think.
Okay, qualifying. Okay. What about the next question? How well known are fair housing and tenant protection laws and resources among City of LA residents and community organizations?
I know internally we can improve.
Same, I agree with that.
It's just a lot of information, and for us, our staff are case managers, and they just have a lot on their plate. And I wish that we could be able to bring on, similar to the housing agencies where you have your specialists in certain areas. But unfortunately, we don't have that. Yeah.
Okay.
It would be helpful if we could have, like, I mean, I know it's probably impossible, but like a direct line to someone that we could, if we have issues, like we could contact and it's a quick answer. I feel like that would be helpful.
Okay, so just making it really clear how you can get your questions answered. Let's see.
Knowing the right department or person or wherever to ask those questions, and then getting a response that doesn't take too long, you know, because for whatever is happening with the client, you know, days could mean everything.
Do you find this information to be relatively accessible on the city's website or kind of online at all?
I feel like sometimes it goes into nowhere land, like you send an email and then, you know, I'm sure they're busy too. I mean, to be honest, like I haven't accessed it a lot, I'll be honest. But, and we could do better on that, but I feel like just with any agency, like if you just know the right people to ask, you know what I mean? Like, then you can get your answer and then move forward with the client. I think sometimes, you know, it's a general, you know, email box and multiple, you know, sometimes your email gets lost. I feel like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's also a resource is if you're, you know, you're assisting someone, if you're able to call on their behalf, and you can call the department's rent hotline. There are staff who are ready to take questions and also direct you to the proper source to provide assistance. So we have a rent hotline that assists tenants and landlords in the city of LA, and also if necessary, opening a case, an investigation into any perhaps wrongful doing that they find for a property owner. Also, there is the Housing Rights Center is contracted by the city of Los Angeles. And so they are the entity that addresses fair housing issues for the city. So if necessary, they folks who need assistance will be directed to the Housing Rights Center if you know, depending on what the situation may be. So I'll share in the chat the rent hotline number for LAHD. If you know, if that's something that perhaps you can, you know, have readily available. So when you're working with someone, you need to get an answer, folks will be there ready to take your call.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Are there things the city and HACLA could do to improve how they get information to all residents, particularly low-income households, the BIPOC community, and others who might be at the greatest risk of housing instability?
Maybe like TV commercials or radio commercials. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Like Nancy's a wealth of knowledge here. I have everything open on my screen. I'm gonna send to my staff after this. Yeah, and we operate housing, so you know that's something to think about. But, yeah, I think you know I think TV, radio ads would be really helpful. I mean, I go to a lot of meetings and I haven't heard of some of these resources.
Yeah, that's the problem, and we continue to hear it, which is unfortunate because there's quite a bit that our rent division is doing. They're the folks that pretty much administer the city's rent stabilization ordinance, also working in regards to the tenant anti-harassment ordinance, also just recently worked on the just cause ordinance, and will play a huge role in the city's the implementation of part of the United to House LA measure that was passed. So there are quite a bit of things that are happening in terms of, or at least from what we hear, and we do see it as well, but others don't, in terms of what's being put out there in regards to advertising, in regards to noticing, and in regards to all of these, you know, the different sources of information that the LHD provides to inform tenants of their rights. There's also webinars that take place to inform tenants of their protections. And it's also meant for landlords to teach them, right, in terms of what the law is. And we have these scheduled regularly, but it's unfortunate that people don't know about it and know that it's accessible, and also know that we provide it in Spanish, and so it's there, but I think it's something we have to do better at in terms of making it more widely known. In the past, perhaps maybe prior to COVID, at least that what I heard was in terms of there was quite a bit that was done in terms of bus ads, and also even working with certain news stations as far as informing the public about what the city provides. And all of this was done. And there's even a phone number that people can text if they want to find out if they live in a rent stabilization ordinance, because of course people don't know that, right? And there's certain protections if you live in an RSO. And so you can get a response back right away based off of the information you provide as far as your address. So that's important to know too, because there's certain protections for those tenants. So it's there, it's just making it available for residents, and then of course for service providers to also know to also share with folks. So that's definitely something that I will take back, as far as there needs to be more information and accessibility to what's available, because there's quite a bit, and you'll find there will be more in terms of what's available and what's required in terms of tenant protections going forward, based off of the recent passing of the United House LA measure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca, did you have a question?
I do. I'm just wondering, do you ever do trainings or for case managers, or like if we invited you to one of our case manager meetings to kind of talk about these type of things? That's one question. And then the other just comment, I think what's hard for clients is not feeling empowered enough to do something about any issues that are going on with the landlord sometimes. Fortunately, like for our residents, they have a case manager assigned, but I'm just thinking people at large that don't feel like they might get retaliated against if they make some sort of, attempt to, handle their own conflict with a landlord. So I'm just wondering if there's anything around that that's taught or talked about in the webinars for residents, or is there any help? Like, could they ask for help? Someone to help them navigate through that.
Yeah. So in terms of the having someone speak about what's available and tenants' rights and what's these various sources of protections that the city has, they appropriate rent staff can go out and be able to speak to a group or an event or anything you may have. So that can be done. You just have to provide, submit a request, and then they need to make sure that staff is available and secured for that day and time. So staff does go, the rent staff in our department do go out and do that upon request. The other thing, to answer your question in terms of feeling empowered or not, I want to ensure that tenants do not feel as though they'll be retaliated against if they were to make a complaint. That is very important. That is, a key concern. So under the tenant anti-harassment ordinance, that is that's the thing as far as harassment being in various details in terms of what that looks like, what is harassment, right? But that is considered a crime under the ordinance. Now, all that to say that we also understand there's also a need for further enforcement of that ordinance, and we know this, and that's another step in which the city is considering. how do we, now that we have this in place, how do we really strengthen this, and how do we really make it as effective as it needs to be, right? It's in place for a purpose, but how is it really being utilized, and how are we really adding teeth to it? So that's what I hear in terms of what's under consideration and moving it further. But that is in place right now. So there is that, which took some time to be developed and be adopted by council, but it has been. So that's a great thing. So it's just a matter of now getting to the place of how do we strengthen what we have in place. Same thing with the source of income. The source of income discrimination, the prohibition against that. We have that in place, but again, that's something in which we want to ensure that it's further improved upon, right? Because it's an enforcement situation in which we want to make sure it's going to be useful. So yes.
Nancy, going back to that training, who exactly would we contact at LAHD? Because I would love to connect that person to Christina Cortez, who oversees the city DVSO contracts, like the work that Rebecca and I are talking about. And I think if Rebecca's going to this, I'm sure our other service providers are also going to do the same thing, and would appreciate that type of training.
Sure. So Maria, if you can put your drop your email in the chat, and I'll reach out to the staff and then have them get in contact with you.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. We've gotten so many good resources. Let's see. So we have a couple of questions that are focused on kind of access to housing and opportunity for the clients that you work with. So the first one, for the clients that you serve, what are the biggest housing challenges, and are they able to live in suitable housing in the neighborhoods of their choice?
No. That's a short answer is no. It's difficult for our survivors because there can be multiple areas in the city that aren't safe for them. Depending where their trafficking occurred, it could be in multiple parts of the city. So sometimes that's a big barrier. And then where it is safe for them to live, it's just like beyond what they can afford.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there may just be many areas of the city that aren't safe.
Correct.
Anyone else?
Can you repeat that question again?
So for the clients that you serve, what are the biggest housing challenges, and are they able to live in suitable housing in the neighborhoods of their choice?
Oh.
I think another thing we've been seeing lately also is difficulty finding housing for larger families. So, that's affordable, that'll accept us in a large family, but in a smaller unit. You know what I mean? That's,
okay.
Probably wouldn't normally, but it's what they can afford maybe. So we've had a little bit of a trend on that. We've had a few families that we've had difficulty placing.
Okay, thank you.
Also, undocumented folks are really hard to place just because of their situation.
Are there things that the city could do to address any of those issues? Do you see kind of solutions that could be worked towards?
So I want to mention something about that. I don't know if you all are familiar with the new city department, new in the sense that they haven't been in existence for not even 3 years now. It's the Civil and Human Rights and Equity Department. So it's a department that is in place, and they do enforcement of certain protected classes that we've learned of. So mentioned at the beginning of our meeting was that they provide protections beyond just state and federal protected classes. I believe it's language, citizenship status, and employment status. And they do also enforcement. So, and which is great. So the issue in terms of undocumented folks, and perhaps if there's anything you're experiencing where they're being turned away, they're being discriminated against, they're being mistreated or what have you, perhaps it would be good to connect with that department. And they're new, and we're also beginning our fair housing discussion. So we haven't gotten to the point where we're really able to dive deep into what they provide and how they're going to really speak to and inform our assessment of fair housing plan, but we'll get there. And in the meantime, it would be good if we share with you I like sharing links, so I'm going to share the link to their site. And perhaps if you're able to take a look at their site and find out how to get in contact with someone there in regards to, and just learn about what they do, I think is important, because I think it would benefit the work you're doing, the folks that you're serving, and also it could be a resource, right? Particularly the population in which you're speaking about, the undocumented folks. So I'll share that with you. I do also want to, and Angela's here, which is good. The city's department, Community Investment for Families Department, they also do great things in regards to resources for housing stability as well, and just providing assistant folks, low-income families and households in need of resources that are vital, right? In terms of being able to find housing, obtain housing. They even have a domestic violence program. So I think that's also another department to become familiar with and find out how they could, help be a resource for the folks that you're serving.
Yeah, we're actually funded by DVSO, which is under the CFID. But I think unfortunately, still the undocumented folks were still hard to place, even though we're contracted with them. But I do like that other department, so I'll look them up, or if you send the link, I think that's a good place to start as well. Thank you.
And family source centers, we do their best to stay up on different resources that families need, families with lower incomes, a variety of resources, including housing. So that's an important part as well. And you're not
Are there neighborhoods in the city that people are more able to find housing in to meet their needs, and kind of maybe neighborhoods that are less accessible? Can you talk about some of those specific areas where maybe clients have been able to find housing or not?
A lot of our clients tend to move to Antelope Valley. However, it's removed from the central city where a lot of the employment is. So then travel and all of that, their commute becomes an issue. So they move out there, yet they're still reliant on assistance until they're able to find employment, but there's not a lot out there.
Okay, thank you. Anywhere else that folks would speak to?
I mean, I would say just within the city of LA, it's just difficult because of the price, how expensive it is.
Yeah, we understand that's a huge barrier, just the cost of housing itself. That's a fair housing issue in itself. It's just the high cost of the city. So it's impacting those at not just low income level, but even moderate income level as well.
And I think that also, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. We've had a good success with real estate property in Hawthorne that takes a lot of our clients. It's a commute because most of the clients, used to live in LA, but that actual agency has worked with a lot of our survivors in the last couple of years. Like their credit can be horrible. I mean, but they're willing to take a chance on our clients, but it's in the city of Hawthorne. From single units to one bedrooms to even the 3 bedrooms for families that have larger, kids, like 6 kids, large families. But most people don't want to move to the outskirts of LA, they want to stay like around LA, but we've had success in that area, in that city, Hawthorne.
All right, thank you so much, Alice. So
East LA
Hawthorne,
County, oh, sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say East LA County as well. We just placed a couple clients, Pasadena, El Monte. We're seeing Covina is getting higher. So it's like Covina, San Dimas are getting higher, but like Glendora, West Covina, Rowland Heights. Again, transit is an issue because, the line only goes like through Covina, but there's really no rail line on the south side of like the southeast part of LA County. So like right there in like Rowland Heights and stuff, but there's like the buses. So, that's kind of an issue too.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, related to that, part of the housing study is also going to look at how well residents are able to access kind of community resources. So we're just talking about transit and kind of the commute people have, but thinking about community members you serve, how well would you say they're able to access community resources like good schools, good jobs, transit, healthcare, and government or social services? Are there groups that have better access to these resources, or kind of what would the barriers be to that? Four minutes.
As I mentioned, we're based in the San Fernando Valley, which is about 20 miles from downtown LA. And to me, and I know clients and our case managers also say there just feels like there's not a lot of resources out here. So a lot of our clients have to travel, a great distance, especially if they're taking the bus or public transportation to sort of access those resources. If they have to go and sign papers and things like that, is what I mean. But a recent example, a workforce center. So we used to have one that was down the street from us in the West San Fernando Valley, and now there's only 2, and they're both on the east side, which is, again, it can be an hour drive if you had your own car from where we're at to Pacoima. So I just think in general, the Valley doesn't really have a lot of resources that I feel downtown LA and outside the other parts of LA have.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and the workforce centers in particular,
Mm-hmm.
It's an important resource. Anyone else on kind of this issue of access to opportunity, when it sounds like folks are maybe finding housing sometimes further out, a little bit further outside of the center of the city? What does access to these look like?
It's harder if they have kids because, we're seeing if they have to work in the city, especially if they're single, just leaving an abuser, and then, childcare. A lot of childcare programs are getting cut. And if they have no access to, schools, it's hard because it's like they either have to school them where they live, and if they have to commute in, it's the childcare issue. But staying closer to LA, then they're worried about just income in general because they have to put so much into their housing. So it's being able to feed their families.
Yeah, thank you. Are there approaches you think could help reduce these barriers? So they're kind of big issues.
It's hard to think of a model that works because there's so many models that have been tried.
I guess, yeah, so folks that have moved further out do you feel like they've been able to access the resources that they need? And I'll also just ask, is there anything else that we haven't talked about yet that you all feel is important for us to note for the study?
I will add, Dr. Stephanie Gruberg here mentioned was childcare. I can't believe I forgot about that. It is ridiculously expensive, even if you go through like a CCRC program. Sometimes, especially if you have multiple children, we also serve really large families, sometimes up to 6, 8 children. So the parent is never really going to be able to go work if they have all these children that they have to watch for or put in childcare. They'll be basically working to put their children in childcare. So I think more programs that help with that would really help with a lot of this as well, especially in terms of housing stability and all that.
Okay, thank you so much. So childcare programs, anything else that would maybe help reduce some of the barriers to access to opportunities in the city?
Maybe giving companies an incentive to have programs like that, because if there's models like Google and even like some parts of Disney that have if they're high in the corporate, they have access to childcare help, childcare subsidies, but with medium level jobs, lower level entry, usually you can't access those kind of benefits. So you would think that we would need to invert the pyramid, right? So we need to somehow give companies that have, even like Amazon, if they have warehouse jobs, giving them some kind of maybe a subsidy or something to encourage them to support those, what they would consider lower level income generators, to provide some kind of childcare, because the pyramid really is inverted when it comes to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point.
I think also just doing outreach so that they know those resources are out there. I think sometimes they just don't know what's available to them either. And maybe helping them out. I think too, like helping them out with transportation, if that's like an incentive to access some of those resources, because sometimes they don't have money for bus passes or they live far away. And so gas prices are crazy. So I don't know, maybe have some type of programs that they could help them with accessing those resources if they have to drive a fair distance or ride the bus.
So I would also, I think Angela put in the chat the CIFD the link to that department. So CIFD, Community Investment for Families Department, has family source centers that are administered by the department. I believe there's 14 or so, and they're throughout the city and serve folks no matter where you live, as long as you're in the city of LA. But they're strategically in certain communities, right? So if you're near one, it's best to access the closest one. But they provide employment and education assistance to households who are eligible. So perhaps there is also assistance that can be provided, or referrals for transportation assistance. And so those, the Family Source Centers are good places to also consider connecting with and finding out how they can assist the clients that you serve.
Thank you.
No problem. Again, other additional services that the city provides that perhaps we're not aware of.
And before I think we're about to go back to the main room, but I'll add the links to the surveys in the chat.
Hello, everyone. We went a little bit past our time, but I have a couple last slides to share about how you can continue to stay engaged with the project. So first of all, thank you everyone for such an engaging discussion and for sharing all your thoughts and ideas about housing and neighborhoods in the city. Your input truly make the study stronger. And if you have more input after tonight, feel free to, or this afternoon, feel free to share it in that SurveyMonkey form. You can also send emails to lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. If you visit our project website, which is the first link that you see on this slide, you'll see recordings from other stakeholder meetings, the recordings from the community meetings that we had at the end of last year. And you'll continue to see opportunities for engagements on that site. We also, on that website, have a survey that's available to folks who represent different organizations. So certainly, if you haven't had an opportunity to take that survey yet, please do. We'd love for you to participate in it. We also have a community member survey that is available for anyone living or working in LA. It's available in 7 different languages. If you need it or would like to share it with someone in a language that we don't have, let us know and we can work on a translation of that. But we'd ask you to share that with as many folks as you can. So clients, residents, neighbors, colleagues. If you're comfortable sharing it on your social media, that would be great. But we are really trying to get as much participation there as possible. And I think our staff will drop some of these links in the chat too, so that you can access them from there. Finally, if you would like any hard copies of the survey, if you might have a meeting coming up or some opportunity to share hard copies with people, please send an email to that email address and we'll be more than happy to send you however many you need. Just trying to get as many folks as possible involved in the study. And with that, I will turn it over to Nancy.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. I'm gonna just reiterate quite a few things that Melissa shared. So we are encouraging all of you to stay involved in the city's assessment for housing development process. Your input today has been very helpful and valuable, and we want to make sure that we continue to have you to continue to participate in this AFH process going forward. As Melissa mentioned, our Assessment of Fair Housing webpage, which is here on this slide, is one to continue to visit to stay up to date on what has happened with our program. And as new updates are going to be posted, that would be the best place to visit. For example, when we have the Assessment of Fair Housing Draft Plan available for a public comment period, we will be notifying the public about it on that page as well as through other means. And then, of course, we're also asking that you, if you haven't done so already, complete the stakeholder survey, which the link has been shared with everyone. That is another way in which we're gathering input from everyone. And since you registered for this meeting, you are part of our email list, so you will receive updates. But if you have any additional ideas to share after today, please feel free to email us at our project email account, lahd.afhpolicy@lacity.org. That will be the place that will be receiving additional comments, as well as through the SurveyMonkey link that was shared. And also please spread the word with others, folks that you serve, any clients you have, your peers, your colleagues, those who are not yet connected with the AFH, please let them know if they're interested in staying up to date. They can also send us a request and request to be added to the contact list, and they can email us, and that way they'll be added to our list to receive updates. And again, we thank you for taking time to participate in the city's AFH discussion, and we hope you continue to stay connected. And with that, I'll close the meeting and say thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.